I mean,
No, I
obviously
think poll workers should be hired locally. I think that the cities and towns should run their elections locally. I think that voter list maintenance oversight should be by the state, as we want to make sure the towns are doing their job. Mail ballots, we think, should be sent by the state, because we don't want to have the towns incur the cost of sending ballots. And when we want them to go out equally with the rest of the state, we don't want voters in Richmond to get their ballots before voters in
So
Charleston.
that was
So
my
do you like
question.
voting centers?
So there
Are
are-
you fans of voting centers? Is
Yeah,
that something that, I know you've talked about voting centers in an article I read.
Yeah, so voting centers, like as in early voting. So in early voting, you go to a vote center in your town and you cast a ballot. So in that respect, yes.
I've been trying to get a
Yes.
question in for the last 15 minutes, thank you very much. So let's rewind back to what happened in Warwick. How much training are these town clerks, city clerks being given? And how much refresher training? Because you have a lot of people retiring, new clerks are coming in, we just had one in our town. So, I mean, if they're not properly trained, then who's responsible for that training?
So Kathy will speak to that question, then Rob will talk about what we have proposed to tighten that up.
So they're trained on the state level, so any new person that's coming into the Board of Canvassers, they're trained by us. So we do, whether it's in person, Zoom, we go through our central voter registration system, and that's how they're trained. And it's continuous training for, there's various methods of training or different modules of where we train, whether it's mail ballots, processing a voter onto the system, validating signatures onto the CVRS, and processing nomination papers. And those, we do the training with the State Board of Elections, with our archives, and they have to take this training, it's mandatory.
And the Board of Elections runs the training for what you're talking about in the process that happened in Warwick. The Board of Elections says that. But Rob will talk about what we have proposed to tighten this up post the CD1 issue.
Yeah, so we also have, to your point in Warwick, I mean, the law requires the filling out of an application, and all you need to do is fill out that application. Part of that application is the ID number, so you don't have to give your birth certificate. You don't need to give your birth certificate, you don't need to give your social security card, you don't need to give that. So from what I gather from your example, ma'am, is that Warwick didn't do anything wrong. You offered a bunch of documentation that they just don't need by law. So I want to be very clear that Warwick, according to your account,
The whole registration form doesn't even ask for it.
so that's right. So
But you
Warwick didn't do anything
You
wrong.
wrote your ID
Yeah,
number down in that form.
there's a spot for the ID number, but there's no requirement for birth certificates or
License number.
anything like that. You just have to,
Or
yeah.
Rhode Island ID.
I don't remember it asking for my
Yes.
Rhode Island.
So
It
it's
does.
asking you for your Rhode Island
It does.
ID or the last four digits of the social security number.
So you had to fill that out.
Yeah, so I want to be clear that Warwick,
But those are not necessary documents in order for you to register to vote.
But they don't check it, like when
How
you.
does that stop
Yes.
illegals from doing the
So
same
it's,
thing?
so that information is validated, once that information is processed into the central voter registration system, the, last four digits of the social or the Rhode Island ID number is validated with the system. through
But
the
if they're
internet.
not asking it at the time, and they have a photo ID with them, and they're not really the person, they're just telling them to write it down,
that's what's required. That's what the,
but they
that's,
don't have to check to make sure it is the person.
Well, but then
Yeah,
it's
once they're
validated.
processing, yeah,
They
it's
validate
validated.
it. Kathy
You
just said it's
process your
validated.
registration.
Oh, they did, so
We're
they
in the
should have
process.
looked at your ID.
no, when they
No.
took her ID, they would check it in the voter registration system, and the DMV would say, yes, she's got a license.
And furthermore, when she votes to the vote, she is required to show an ID. The voter is required to show an ID at the poll.
But to finish your question, we're also developing a formal training process for the cities and towns. And so we're gonna create, actually we already have, created 7 or 8 modules, things like cybersecurity 101 and signature verification and election laws and all of that. And each Board of Canvassers, each staff member is gonna have to be trained or go through those modules, and we're gonna give them a nice certificate so that they're certified election officials. Much like you, sir, were a poll worker, I'm sure others in this room were poll workers, you get a certificate or you get a something, right? When you take your training class
No.
to indicate, no, you don't get a.
Not even a
think
lollipop.
so.
Nope.
Well, depending on the town, you get lunch. I don't know if you get lunch.
No, we didn't even get the video because it wasn't working. We got sent home.
No, my town of Hopkinton, I'm one of the town clerk when I work for the budget or for the elections. They feed us breakfast, But on lunch, you had to bring your own lunch, but at dinner, at the end of the night, they feed us from the town. But I mean, they do all this training for us, like you said, Kathy, the Zoom and everything. We make sure that we're availability for all the questions, and then when we come in for voting, we make sure that that ID is validated, like you said, it's registered right to the, the big election board over there. But we wanna make sure the town of Hopkinton is, we precise and we're accurate, and we wanna make sure, I assume it like I'm a cougar when they come in. I make sure that everything is legit and nothing, we don't go out of that door, we don't do anything, we just wanna make sure the integrity of our election is right there in our town.
Councilman, can we get them lunch over there in Hopkinton?
Yeah. Thank you
Tina
very
does a
much.
wonderful job.
Oh, thank you,
Thank you,
Councilman.
Tina.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Thank you.
We were talking about tightening some things up. And my children are both military, they've been in for 26 years, and they vote from out of state most of the time. And being Marines, they're like in danger zones most of the time, and they have to vote from far away. In order for them to send in a ballot, they have to have a they have to make a copy of their photo ID with their signature and their picture to send in with their ballot, which is just a piece of paper, it's not even a real ballot paper. But they have to send it in. And I'm trying to advocate that people send in a copy of their driver's license, their photo ID, something, so that we don't have people filling out ballots that came to
Right.
people that,
Why can't they do that?
then they turn in
Right.
10 ballots.
Yeah, that's not the process for Rhode Island residents who are in the military.
Well, my kids were voting from, they were
I mean,
stationed
there is a
in Virginia.
separate, federal voting process that may require that. But if you're requesting a mail ballot, as a Rhode Island resident who's serving overseas in the military, you're requesting it just like everybody in this room would request it, and that's the process. So that might be the.
No, only signature, no picture ID,
Yeah,
no
it's
photo ID?
it's the exact same process for every Rhode Islander as it is for Rhode Islanders serving overseas. Now, there is a separate federal, voting process that occurs, and that might be what you're talking about, or from the state they were.
It was from another state.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about, you said that you had found, two people who voted in double Florida as well?
Three actually, yeah.
Three. What are the consequences for a non-citizen who votes, and what are the consequences for a citizen who double votes?
So for a non-citizen, it's deportation, and right on the voter registration form it has it. I can't remember the jail time and the monetary issues. I believe the two folks who were charged for double voting received, I wanna say probation. I don't recall, to be honest with you, but I can get that for you. But on the voter registration form, it's very, very clear what the consequences are for identifying or putting anything on there that's inaccurate, and then it's the separate piece for those who are not citizens, the risk of deportation.
So maybe we can go back to what happened in Coventry. I can't remember that conversation. The person registered and then said, oh, I'm not able to register?
What Lori said was that they ended up on the voter rolls and that person came to her and said that
Because
they
got a
were on the
letter?
voter rolls and they shouldn't have been, so they were super honest.
So, and I can't specifically remember this, we've done 4 of these. and- Yeah, so, and then you and I talked about the idea of human error.
Right.
This is a, maybe that was what prompted
But
that.
that's why I'm asking the questions regarding the actual number of changes, because I know that you guys have a lot of inputs coming in, and clearly, when we look at the number of changes, for a period of time, like 44,000 changes occurring over, say, a 6-year period of time, that's a lot of changes that get distributed. And that's like national change of address type of information, 44,305 over a 5-year period. But when we start looking at that stuff and say, okay, those changes are being distributed, how can we, as the voters in our jurisdictions of authority, oversee that? And clearly, there was something that broke with regard to what happened in Coventry with data being passed through somehow. And it's the interface between the two, that's why I'm asking about the software. It's the interface between the two systems and having to go around to the central voter registration system and to maintain that data in an integral way that something doesn't get through.
Yeah, and so to your, you can ask whatever, just ask for whatever you're thinking about with the source code and all that, and I'll check on that. But even to your question, if someone filled out a form and checked that they weren't a citizen on the box, and the city or town wasn't paying attention and entered them in, your question, that's not gonna matter to your point, because this
Right.
wasn't a data issue, this was a human error.
Right.
Didn't read the form properly
And I
and put it
agree.
into the system.
I
So,
agree there's errors that come up, and
Right.
we want to reduce those errors as much as possible.
Of course,
Right?
of course. So-
And that's the objective, correct?
Absolutely, of course.
So-
So that's a training issue,
Right.
that one example I just gave. But for your point about the data, you just have to ask us, and I've got to check with our team about what's available and what's not.
So addressing what that gentleman was saying is, how does a regular elector cover the amount of real-time data, or the data that's being distributed from your offices that is just, it's a fire hose. It's almost impossible for people to keep up with in a normal day-to-day fashion. To say, okay, let me ask you just a very simple question. Between somebody that's, once they're certified in a polling station, they're certified, and they become an elector. My understanding, they go from a voter to a qualified person who can vote. How many people are there until the point, how many people touch the ballot from the point of that, when they receive the ballot, to the point that they merge it? How many other people touch it?
So are you talking about at the polling place?
Yes.
So you sign the poll book, you
Okay,
get your
yep,
ballot,
right?
you vote your ballot, it goes
And
into the
then,
machine.
then you merge it in the machine, correct? With other ballots,
Yeah,
correct?
put it in the machine, yes.
So now my question is, how many people, other than the voter, handle a ballot, and where in the process for the absentee mail ballots, how many chain of custody people are handling those ballots until they're merged? And are they merged with the voters at the precinct, or they're not merged at all, but they're kept at the state and counted by somebody else at the
So
state?
now you're talking about mail ballots, right?
I'm talking about mail
So-
ballots,
so
right,
yeah,
so
so you'd
I'm
have to-
comparing the two,
Correct, got
between
it.
the
So-
precincts that are being voted
Yeah.
and where you have the mail ballots and who's doing what at what point.
Yes.
I wanna know the chain of custody from one end to the other with regard to that, and please address how many different holes or obscure areas we have.
Well, that's a
Thank you.
Board of Elections, the mail ballot piece is Board of Elections. So we send the ballot to the voter, and the voter, when they vote it, they send it back to the Board of Elections. So the Board of Elections handles it from the time that it comes into their facility.
Not the town.
Not the town. Well, the only way the
could drop
town
it off
handles
at
it
the
is
town.
if they drop the ballot into the drop box.
Yeah.
But then it
So
goes
if-
to the Board of Elections.
That's correct, so if it gets dropped into the Dropbox, then I explained the process before, well, two people will go out, they sign the documentation, the board comes and picks it up, brings it to their facility. Once it gets into their facility, I mean, I know generally speaking, you've got the teams of people that will review the envelope to make sure the signature's accurate.
And are they from the towns?
No,
They're
it
not.
gets delivered to the Board of Elections.
So they're not from the towns that are checking the envelopes?
No, the
Okay,
Board of Elections
okay.
is checking the envelope.
Okay,
All that
thank you.
happens
All
at the
right.
board, so the
Okay, thank
teams
you.
at the board are checking the envelopes for the signatures. And then the ballots are opened, they're separated from the envelopes so that the anonymity of the ballot can be kept, and then it goes into the machine. Now, the exact chain of custody would be a question for the Board of Elections. That basically is how it works, but they're better suited to answer that question. And we can have them at the next one, or you can reach out to them.
But you can't say for certain how many people are actually handling it from one
Yeah,
point to
that's a
the
Board of
other.
Elections matter.
Okay,
When I
so
was
it's
town
0 and 1.
sergeant, I had
0
to
and 1.
bring something, I had to bring, at the end of the day, I had to transport, I don't know what I was transporting to the Board of Elections. Were those mail ballots that I
Well,
was?
if you don't know,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
It'd
know.
be a packet to bring to the Board
The
of
day
Elections.
after the election?
At night.
But we
at
have
night.
great chain of custody.
so-
The ballots
On November,
themselves
the
from
first
the
Tuesday of
machines
November, they
have
would
to
give
go.
me
Yeah, it could have very
something.
clearly said on the sheet what they were. I don't know, but I guess, yes, you could have, you brought whatever you were told to bring it to the Board of Elections. If they were mail ballots, then they would be brought into the Board of Elections, and the board would go through the process to certify those ballots and count them.
Rob, I'm asking this because it's an accounting control issue. It's an accounting control issue. There's a fiduciary duty and there's finances involved. That's the only reason why I'm asking.
Understood, and you can
So
get those
I'm
answers.
trying
from the
to, I'm
board.
trying to find out, that's why I'm saying, I wanna
We
work
can
through
get
the
those
process
answers from
and identify those things.
Yeah.
And address many of the issues.
Yeah,
So
and we
that's
can
what I'm
get those answers
thinking
from
to
the
do.
board, too. We will do that. Does anybody want to ask a question? Yeah.
I just wanted